Hello, Peter.
Hey, George.
How are you?
All right, let me shed a little bit more light on this.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right. I think the witching hour has come, and we can begin our conversation with fellow gagglers. So, how are things in Moscow, Peter? I mean, I guess everyone's now preoccupied with the Winter Olympics. So, the 2 weeks, no invasion for 2 weeks because we got to watch the skiers and the ice skaters.
Yeah, it's the Olympics. It's being treated as the Olympics, not political. It's for athletes, like it should be. Okay, it's quite nauseating watching American television about it. I didn't think we'd get to this so quickly, but I mean, the finger wagging is just kind of obnoxious to me. I mean, you're worried about the Uyghurs? Well, why don't you get out of Syria? Show that, show your good faith, okay? I mean, show you're a virtuous people, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, your specialty, why don't you admit that you illegally broke up the state of the former Yugoslavia, okay? You backed it in every way possible, illegal coup against a democratically elected government in Ukraine. And I'm only talking of the last few years.
Exactly, that's right.
I mean, the finger wagging to me it's so hollow. It's so hollow.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think all of this stuff is so ridiculous about, the Olympics, dictatorships are using the Olympics to boost their prestige. Look, I mean, we've had sporting competitions now for more than a century. And, everyone in the world takes part. And chances are many, many countries that take part and love these sporting events are dictatorships. They're not, they don't meet our standards of democracy. That's it. We have to live with it. I mean, it's like, going on about the 1936 Olympics with Hitler. Look, it was assigned to Germany, long before Hitler came to power. It was the time of in the 1920s when the Franco-German reconciliation, what are they supposed to do? Take it away from Germany? Nobody has ever done that. Nobody ever gets the Olympics taken away from them.
Well, Congress passed some kind of stupid legislation about not recognizing the game. I mean, on the day of its opening and stuff like that. I mean, that's just the caliber of people that you have. Okay. Right. And is the litmus test be for just like you said, I mean, so no one should from Saudi Arabia or the Emirates. So none of these people should be able to send a team, right? By your litmus test. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, what was so odious, George, is that it just, particularly in the U.S., I can't speak about outside the U.S., but in the U.S., it's a political cudgel. It has nothing to do with what's important. It's just for our side, my side against them.
That's right. And that's why it is so ridiculous that people like Ingram who go on and on and on about, the Uyghurs. I mean, she doesn't know who the hell the Uyghurs are. I mean, you just sort of, invented this this notion of, the Uyghurs, exactly, yeah. Genocide is being committed against the Uyghurs. How do you know this? Well, because that creep, Jeffrey Nice, that horrible, evil little man who worked at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, holds this tribunal, unofficial tribunal, doesn't have any standing whatsoever, and then says, genocide is being committed against the Uyghurs. So she doesn't know anything about any of that. And the fact is, the Chinese had the games in Beijing. They went perfectly well. I mean, Moscow had the games in 1980. I remember back in, whenever it was assigned to Moscow, it was around about 1970, 71. So at the time, height of détente. But the fact is that West Germany, who had the Olympics in 1972, couldn't do the minimum, which is to provide security for its athletes. So here's, West Germany, model democracy, model well. It failed on the most basic test of a sponsor of a competition, security for your athletes. But Moscow provided security. There was no one got in or out of the Olympic Village. The West Germans couldn't even guarantee that. So, spare us the whole thing. Democracy, we have to give it to democracy. So Beijing holds, there was no problem about the 2008 games, and I'm sure there's not going to be any problem with these games.
But I mean, the Uyghurs just came about after 2008, right, George? I mean, they're necessarily that just came into being.
I guess so, yeah. I can't remember when I first heard about them, yes.
Well, I know something about Uyghurs, and I know that they're involved in international terrorist groups around the world. Okay,
Right.
it is a terrorist threat. It is a security threat.
Right.
That is known.
Right.
A genocide thing it's a very obscure people that are saying this, and then people parrot it for political reasons. I mean, if you care so much, then we should go to war with China, right? Right? Huh?
Exactly. Exactly. And so they say all this, boycotting the game, but again, that means we're not going to have any kind of international sporting events because they've been held in competitions have been held in fairly in countries that do not meet the standards of enlightened Western opinion. I mean, there was the World Cup in Argentina in 1978 when, at the time of the Argentine general's dictatorship. We've got the World Cup coming up in Qatar, I guess, at the end of this year. So, you can't start going around saying, oh, we're going to take all these things away. And then Ingram, because she's a very politically savvy, she said, well, we've got to love the athletes, and then when they come home, we're going to celebrate them. Well, I mean, if you're going to celebrate them when they come home, why can't you celebrate them now? I mean, I don't understand that. Why is it okay to celebrate them only when they come home, but you're not permitted to watch them now?
Of course, it's all being set up. I mean, you win 2 gold medals, you win a silver, and then you come back and say, sponsorship. Just tell us how bad it was in Beijing. Well, I got a story to tell you, and that's exactly what it's going to be.
Right.
Okay? Well, let me sign the contract first. Okay, let's get that over with. Okay, here, got my lawyers. Okay, now I'm ready for the camera. Go ahead.
That's it. And who I can't remember the name of that basketball player whom she interviewed.
The Turkish guy.
Yeah, Turkish guy, big guy. And he said, well, I want to, if I go there, I want to go see the prison camps. Well, I would like to see what happens if Olympic Games are held in the United States and an athlete says, you know what, I want to go visit the prison, in the DC prison in which the January the 6th suspects are being held. What would the response be? I don't think it would be very welcoming.
Can you reserve a helicopter? We'd like to see Gitmo too.
Okay? Yeah, exactly. We want to go see that. Yeah, definitely. So I mean, the whole idea. Yeah, of course. They're not going to let you go and see. To prison camps or whatever. I mean, these are ridiculous requests. So, but I was just thinking also that. I mean, I'm not much into winter sports. I've never really taken much interest in that. But the summer sports, which I quite like, they try to get all these women interested in the sports because it's kind of they want to, and so they made a big deal out of gymnastics, which when I was a child, gymnastics wasn't really a very big deal. I mean, it became a very big deal, but it was. Ironically, it was after the 1972 Olympics when, I don't know if you remember, when that little girl, Olga Korbut, she just became an international star, largely because no one had ever expected Soviet athletes to be kind of flamboyant and kind of flirtatious and playful. People expect the Soviet athletes to be very grim, very serious, very business-like. Yeah, big. They do their thing. They don't smile, and then they leave. And she was so different. And then gymnastics became a very big deal. And it's all really just to this little girl, Olga Korbut.
And remember Nadia Comaneci?
Yeah, that was the very next Olympics. That was Nadia Comaneci, exactly. Yeah, she was just amazing.
Yeah, Olga Korbut had a very sad ending.
What happened to her?
I'm trying to remember, but there was addiction involved, poverty. The thing is that it's during the Soviet Union, it was a prestige thing, it was global prestige, and there was an enormous amount of pressure put on these very young people, which I think is wrong. I think it's a form of child abuse. But in the U.S., it's sponsorship. Okay, and so when the Soviet Union came to an end, she was still a known figure, but she wasn't bankable. I'm sorry to say that, but she wasn't bankable. And
that's right.
not in Russia and abroad as well. I mean, there might have been circumstances where if her English where it was up to snuff, she could be a commentator or something like that.
Yes.
There's a lot of missteps for her, okay?
Right.
Being such a global star and just the kind of die in obscurity later.
Yeah, that's right. Because I just didn't remember hearing about her at all afterwards. You know, that was it. She just.
Oh, if you did hear it, it was really
negatively
sad.
Yeah, that's right. Because Nadia Comaneci, I mean, then she did become either a trainer or a commentator. Because I have seen her in later years. I mean, obviously, she put on a little bit of weight since those.
Well, that would be easy for those young ladies.
Yeah, exactly. So she was barely recognizable as that amazing athlete that she was. But at least she had a post Olympic career. But Corbin, that's very sad. I didn't realize that that's what happened.
No, but I mean, but Russia is a winter sports country.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so.
There's a skating rink very close to me, and it's all these little tots to young teens with their hockey stick. They're fanatics about hockey here. I mean, you can see the little tykes. They're like pretending they're hitting the puck as they're walking to the metro. I mean, it's just hockey in the brain. Right. And it's the hockey parents carrying these. They're all carrying these, like they're like little trolleys. It's like all the gear. I guess it's all the padding and everything like that. Right. So the little guys are with the stick, and the parents are hauling all the junk behind them. It's really quite a sight to see.
I can see. I mean, it must be. I mean, I don't know what the economics of it is, but you know, to get into the sport, I mean, you need a lot of money because that's expensive equipment that you got to buy yourself.
From what I understand, if you're truly exceptional, you're gonna get some help. But then it's kind of it's kind of the westernization of Russia. It's like the parents have to cough up a lot of money because you have to all have. You can't show up with, what grandmother sewed this for me. No. This is what you got to buy. And I'm sure the distributor is making a very nice profit off of it.
Yeah, that's all right. But all of that, I mean, it's like, even like ice skating. Well, first of all, you need to buy skates. And particularly as they're children, so they're growing, so they have to buy new skates every year or so. But then you also have to get on the ice rink, and that again, you have to pay for that, because you're going to use the ice rink for several hours a day. So tennis, the same thing. I mean, you have to make use of the tennis courts. They're not cheap. As Kira has pointed out, I mean, she has a membership of a tennis club, and that's a price.
Kira has also told me about equestrian. Woo! It's the same world-class, outrageously expensive, like it's everywhere else in the world. Okay.
Right. Yeah. That's right. That's the great thing about football, which I guess is why it's such a universal sport. You don't need expensive equipment. You just get a ball and you just start kicking. I mean,
if it's guys, it's shirts and skins. Okay.
That's it. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So anyway, we got a super chat from our good friend Spectre in the air. Hi, Spectre. Good to see you here. It says, "Hi guys. What the elite deep state being hypocritical? I'm a little loopy. 90-kilometer trainer ride. Don't worry, it really sucked. 90 kilometers. That's a lot of. That's 90 kilometers. That's about 45 miles. That's a big distance.
I'm going to have a cold beer for you right after.
But I mean, I think it's very interesting. I mean, the hypocrisy of the media. I mean, it particularly is shown up with this the way the media are covering RTDE. I mean, I keep saying RT Deutsch, but I mean they get RTDE. And now that the Russians have removed the accreditation of Deutsche Welle, the media just report the Deutsche Welle part, but not the RTDE part, which is, the Russians have retaliated in the way that they said they would retaliate. They said, you take away or you ban us, not even they took away accreditation, we will retaliate. That's always like they do that. We will do exactly to you what you did to us. But there's that Ned Price about whom we were speaking yesterday, he tweeted out, "Well, outrageous, no German, the Russians cracking down on free speech because they've closed down the office of Deutsche Welle." Nothing as to what had happened before.
I was waiting for it. I wasn't surprised. I was waiting for it. I mean, didn't they expect it too? Or somehow are they just more holy and more virtuous? It's so exhausting, George. Okay, right. You can do it. We can do it, but no, you can't do it. I mean, that's where it's with everything. Right. Energy policies, defense policy, security policy. Yep. It's always one way, my way or the highway. That's exactly how it is.
Yes, it always is. And particularly, when the Russians give due notice. I mean, I remember back in the time of the Skripals, and the British were getting so agitated about RT that there were moves afoot to ban RT altogether from the UK. And I think Theresa May would have done it. I mean, she was just crazy about the Russians. But the Russians made clear, you do that, and we will retaliate against all of your media. No more BBC, The Economist, everybody's out. And I think that's when they got cold feet. That they suddenly said, "Hey, we're just gonna, you British media would just simply be out of Russia," which means, other countries' media, they'll still be covering Russia. The British media will be out. And so Theresa May got cold feet. But had it not been for that, I think RT would have been banned.
George, I think it was a little over 2.5 weeks ago, the Hillary-styled quaff Blinken was always saying reciprocity. That's reciprocity.
Right.
I mean, do we need to spell it for you?
Right.
That's what reciprocity is.
Yeah. That's right. And it always goes one way, which is it's always the West that initiates the initial aggressive move, and then the Russians retaliate. And that's presented as, God, these swinish Russians. But of course, the one time the Russians didn't retaliate.
I was just about to say this. Go ahead.
No, was the time when Obama, on his way out of the door, expelled these diplomats. Yeah, no evidence whatsoever. It didn't present any evidence that Russia interfered in this election, but nonetheless, he kicked them out of the door, and then they were expecting Russia to retaliate. Then Russia, in a very sporting gesture, because they say, "Hey, after all, this was done by Obama. Obama's only got a few days left. Why should we, mess up our relations with the incoming administration by retaliating?" And so they did it kind of a, turn the other cheek policy, which is, we won't retaliate. We'll be the better man. And the Obama people, they conferred in the Oval Office and said, this proves that there was collusion between Trump and Moscow, which means we have to really investigate Trump even more deeply than we have been. So that's how they took the fact that Russia didn't retaliate.
Well, just about any other administration, and I don't care which party, would have said would have drawn the opposite conclusion. Okay, I mean, because not to go into it deeply, but General Flynn was talking to his counterparts around the world.
Right.
It's normal. That's what he's supposed to do.
Right.
Okay. And they're not supposed to be leaked to the media or anybody else. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
Reciprocity is the word, and up until we get to that point, we're going to keep going down these blind dead ends.
Yeah, no, that's right, and it was really an appalling business, because, of course, in the first place, as you know, Flynn was talking to Kislyak about an important issue, which Kislyak just didn't know what's going on, because it's unheard of for an outgoing administration to do such a thing. Just got a few days left in power. He's essentially sabotaging an incoming administration. So Kislyak really didn't know, what are we supposed to do? And Flynn gave the non-committal response, which is don't escalate. And I guess Kislyak took this up, back to his bosses in Moscow, and Putin, I think I think almost like a disdainful gesture towards Obama, opened the Kremlin. You remember he said he opened the Kremlin to American diplomats. Here,
and their children.
And their children, exactly. Enjoy yourself over the Christmas holiday. Yeah.
Correct me. I want to get my timeline right. Was the consulates and the buildings the Russians had, they were confiscated
that was at the same time, exactly.
At the same time.
At the same time, exactly. Yeah, that was
real spiteful there. Real spiteful.
Very spiteful, exactly. The consulates.
It never happened during the Cold War ever.
No, that's right. That's right. See, haven't been returned. So all these diplomatic compounds, they're still in the possession of the United States. Obama, this was a total attempt by Obama to sabotage, the Trump administration. And it's never been done at all. And then the idea that they said, okay, right, so now we're going to spy on them even harder because because the Russians essentially turned the other cheek. So now we've got the pretext. Oh, and let's do the Logan Act. So let's see if we can nail Flynn under the Logan Act.
And all those folks that were involved in that, they're back in power.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. So it got Spectre in the air, another super chat. Thank you so much, Spectre. I said, don't forget the US took the embassy for no reason, all trumped up. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It was a really nasty, spiteful gesture. And as you say, Peter, they're all back. So that's it. They got their reward. They hobbled Trump for 4 years with this whole Russiagate, and then here they are, back. So it really is truly a disgusting.
Yeah, but having said that, I have to say that I take a lot of glee. Yes, a lot of glee, and seeing how NATO just paints itself into a corner. Bends itself into a pretzel. It's all because of this, George. It's all because of this. We warned everyone. We've been warning them on Crosstalk and then later here at the Gaggle. When you let Russiagate bleed into policy, this is what you get. You limit your options. Right. That is the worst thing you can do for a policymaker. Right. Take stuff off the table. Yeah, sure. I'll work with two pieces now. Right. It's insane. It's insane. Right. It's like getting stuck with two rooks. You can do a lot of stuff, but you're probably not going to win.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's a kind of an interesting arc as to how the Obama administration got itself into this. Remember, 2012. There's Obama mocking Romney with his his crack about, oh, the 1980s are calling. They want their foreign policy back because. Romney was such a moron. He tried to be a hawk on Russia and thought that he could win an election that way. Total idiot. I mean, he was even a bigger idiot when right before the election, Benghazi fell in his lap. Any politician, with half a brain would have just seized on Benghazi and just run with it. I mean, it's in your lap. Obama, for no reason at all, got himself into this war in Libya. He got rid of Gaddafi, who brought stability to Libya, who'd been actually quite friendly with the West. He destroyed it, and now a U.S. ambassador is dead. If you can't defeat an incumbent president with that, you have no business being in politics. So anyway, that was the Romney.
Yeah, and particularly having the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton at the helm.
Exactly.
That's the cherry on the top.
It's the cherry on the top. That's absolutely right. Yeah. So then Obama, and then that was in 2012, and then by 2016, presumably the 1980s foreign policy, Obama had embraced it all, and for no reason at all. Again, this election thing was just something that he trumped up, and Syria, basically Putin saved him in Syria. He had made a complete fool of himself with Syria. He couldn't get himself out of the mess, and then Obama stepped in and saved him by coming up with this deal and say, oh, great, so Obama has delivered, he's brought this great deal into Syria. So
Yeah, but I mean, why did Barack Hussein Obama do that? Because, well, he couldn't leverage his name to get Hillary elected. Oh, that really pissed his ego. His ego was butthurt, George. Yes. And what about his legacy, which is nothing to talk about at all? Probably one of the most failed presidencies of all time.
Right.
But no, he's got his ego directs him in everything that he does. He's one of the greatest narcissists that's ever been a politician. And Hillary wasn't going to be able to seal the deal for his legacy, not for her. The hell with her. His legacy. That's what it was all about. And he's bookend with Donald Trump.
That's right.
Oh, wow. Poor Barack Hussein Obama.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's what he thought. This will be his legacy. He jumped into this race. He was convinced that he was going to deliver this, the presidency for Hillary. Hillary would just simply be kind of, I guess, she'd just be carrying on his legacy or his policies. He failed because he made the cardinal error in politics. You never throw your own reputation on the line for somebody else.
Someone else
for yourself, but don't do it for someone else because it doesn't translate. I mean, it's David Cameron.
Eisenhower did do it.
No, you never do that. David Cameron made the same blunder when he threw everything, his own reputation, into Brexit. And suddenly the two issues became entangled. Exactly. So people voted for Brexit because they hated Cameron so much. So he was the worst possible advertisement for the European Union. But Obama, so he made this cardinal error. He was made to look a fool because he had, having already said so many times to Trump, the whole idea that an election can be stolen or that there could be any fraud in an election. What a joke, what a laugh. Why don't you go campaign? So, having said that, he suddenly turned around. Yeah, fraud, hoax. Yeah. We had all that. Just shows what an absolute zero Obama was.
And that intelligence report that came out in the waning days of his administration, no intelligence report of that level had ever been compiled in that amount of time.
No, of course
completely cherry-picked, okay?
That's right.
These things take years. And there is always a section of dissenting views.
Yes, that's right. Exactly.
What's there?
Right. It wasn't. That report, that intelligence community assessment was not in any kind of an intelligence review. It was just written by Brennan, and a couple of his handpicked minions, and they wrote this thing. So it wasn't at all, although they say it's an intelligence community assessment, as if all the intelligence agencies of the government had their input. No, there was no input at all.
And 7 pages of it was on RT, which itself was dated information. Public information. So is that what the intelligence community does? It reads public sources. And even what they wrote about RT was like 4 or 5 years old.
Exactly. It was about the 2012 election. So it's like, so you're talking about the 2016 election and you're talking, but instead you're writing about the 2012 election. So yeah, that was it. But that's it. They don't really have anything information. It's just like this recent report by the State Department about Russian propaganda and disinformation. It's all about RT. I mean, it's like, that's it. That's your, that's all you've got. Just, reporting about RT. So that, they just have RT on the brain. Anyway, we have another super chat from our friend Spectre in the air. So it says, agree about your thoughts about Obama, but Biden has beaten him as the biggest failed president. Wow, lucky us. Yeah, I think so too, because he certainly is a failure. But he doesn't even have the redeeming qualities, if you call them, of Obama. That Obama seemed young and energetic, and just seemed like a vigorous character.
Yeah, and different. I mean, he was unique, the first African American to be
exactly.
Twice. Okay?
Yeah.
But you know what? Barack Hussein Obama continues to blunder. He throws his weight against Joe, giving him his blessing at the last minute, essentially.
Yeah.
And now Barack Hussein Obama has to wake up in a sweat at night thinking, well, Donald Trump seems like a great president compared to your pick, Obama.
Yes.
Blunder after blunder. Everybody says he had good political instincts. No, he didn't.
He did not at all.
It's all mythology. It was an empty suit 8 years, except for his blunders abroad. And I'm glad you brought it up. Well, a red line in Syria. I mean, Putin pulled him out of that. Okay, and what did Obama do? Regime change in Ukraine. Okay,
exactly. And look, Obama won because in 2008 he was up against John McCain, and in 2012 against Mitt Romney. Now, neither McCain nor Romney can ever win an election. I mean, it's a scientific impossibility. It cannot happen. I mean, there's nothing, I could run against Mitt Romney and beat him. You could run against Mitt Romney. I mean, it cannot happen. The country just doesn't like Mitt Romney. This awful, wasp, arrogant, condescending person who's had every privilege in life. And then he says things like, I enjoy firing people. And then, about 47% of the public, they're not going to vote for me.
Women.
So he's and then what does he do? He goes decides that he wants to be in the legislature, even though all his life he's just been an executive. He was a businessman, then he was a governor. Decide, I want to be in the legislature for no other reason but to screw Trump over. I mean, that's the only reason he's in the Senate. I mean, there's no reason for him whatsoever to be in the Senate. But how many times can I impeach Trump? He's the only person who's managed, who's voted twice to impeach the leader of his own party. I mean, never happened. Twice.
Yeah, his hiring instincts came back to him, firing, right?
Yes,
okay.
That's it.
But I mean, for me, Mitt Romney epitomizes so much of the Republican Party, and that's why I don't almost never have anything good to say about the Republican Party, because it's full of Mitt Romneys.
That's
okay,
right. That's it.
And you know what? The rank and file don't like Mitt Romneys. Okay, as George said, he could never win. He would. They're Nixon, Reagan, Trump. They had followers that would crawl over glass. Okay, Mitt Romney, John McCain,
never at all. Because in the case of John McCain in particular, he was entirely manufactured by the media. The whole war hero, that somehow an American hero. No one in America ever regarded him as that. I mean, it's entirely something in the media that we have to bow down before when John McCain speaks because what he went through. No one gives a damn about any of that with John McCain. He never had any real following. Even on his personal life, he's a prisoner of war. Comes back. The wife who had stood by him all these years, he quickly dumps her. And he marries into money. Just even on a personal level, he's obviously an absolute creep.
Even in the service, even as a Navy pilot. I don't want to go into it because I need to get my ducks lined up. But he didn't leave distinguished. Let's put it that way.
No. I mean, clearly, in terms of collaborating with the enemy, I think that case is very strong. Because his colleagues, the people, his comrades, knew all about that and reported on that he colluded with his captors. The story about the fire on the ship, that's the one I don't know enough about, other than what I've read on the internet, so I don't know how true that is. But nonetheless, it's less than stellar. And even, he was also a very bad student. I mean, you have to remember, he came, I think, second to last in his class.
But he had daddy, George.
He had, exactly. His father, who was a very big shot in the U.S. Navy, bailed out. And as a fighter pilot, even in training, he, I think, destroyed 2 fighter jets. So he crashed 2 fighter jets. Those fighter jets are expensive. So they don't really like their pilots destroying fighter jets in training. It's like, that's millions of dollars you've lost for us. So he crashed two of them because he really wasn't very good. I mean, and I think Trump was right. Hey, I like people who don't get captured. I mean, the North Vietnamese didn't have a very strong kind of air defense system, but they still managed to shoot him down.
Well, and also, I mean, let's say the obvious, he just wasn't a very nice guy.
Okay. No, exactly. That's what everybody also said. The people who worked for him, he was a bully, lost his temper often, and, very, very unlikable. Anyway, we have another super chats from Spectre in the Air. He says, the United States really needs another church commission. Intelligence community is out of control and too political. Again, an Obama result. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, the Church Commission was very active in the mid 1970s, and really, its reports. I mean, it pulled its punches. We have to remember. But even in pulling its punches, it presented a devastating picture of American involvement in coups, assassinations, and so on. So Church, after all, was a U.S. senator, was part of the establishment, so he didn't want to go that far. But it was a very, very damaging report.
Well, I think it's absolutely necessary, and some people may be surprised about what I'm about to say, but George, it will take a absolute catastrophe for it to happen, where there's such a loss of confidence in the political leadership, a losing of a war, something like that, where people are going to have to say, how could this possibly happen? And then really, as we stand right now, no way. Because look, protecting the intelligence community is one of the only bipartisan things. Okay, it's impenetrable. Okay, and plus all of the money that's involved. Have all of these think tanks that are funded by the arms dealers and all of the producers and all of this. Like the Qataris and the Saudis and all of them. Okay, it's really a very, very tall task to be able to take on these people.
Yeah, no, I agree, because we already know a great deal. So it's like, it's not like we're in the dark. We know that the CIA was spying on the senators who were preparing the report about CIA torture. We know that. I mean, that's not a secret. They're spying on Dianne Feinstein and others. We know the CIA was actively involved in trying to thwart Trump from becoming president, and then was involved in trying to overthrow Trump. So we already know that. We know that the CIA was training jihadis in Syria. We know that for no reason other than to overthrow Bashar al-Assad, who was no enemy of the United States. So so we all know that, but somehow CIA just sort of rides along, and in fact, when the Trump was attacked, he wasn't on the side of our intelligence services. Imagine he didn't believe what our intelligence services were telling him. When he went to Helsinki and he said, "Well, Putin told me this." I have no reason to question what Putin says. It's, oh my God. You're supposed to believe what Brennan, what Clapper are telling you. They're the people to rely on. So I mean, any political leader say, I don't want to listen to my intelligence people because I know they're bullshitting me. I know that they're trying to get me into a war that this country is going to regret.
Yep. And what Trump should have just said, well, that's what the president of the Russian Federation said. What did you expect? Something different? Next question.
Exactly. Exactly.
But irrespective of how the Russian president would answer about meddling in another country's elections, that's not why they're in Helsinki. They're in Helsinki for national security reasons and geopolitics.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because states do not determine their policies, toward one another by these kind of shenanigans. So look, all countries go in for shenanigans, but we're not going to shape our policy toward the United States or vice versa by whatever, assassination here, kidnap, whatever. I mean, we can discuss those, the morality and advisability of those kinds of things, but we're not going to shape our policy by that. And that's why and Putin made that point about the Skripals, because of course he denied that Russia had anything to do with the attempted assassination of Skripals, but that even if it did have something to do with it, it's still minor stuff. Because Skripal, he said, is just a little shit. He's just a worm, a rat, garbage. Why we're wasting time talking about him?
Another example, a lot of people got very upset with after the killing of Khashoggi, and I maybe it was, I don't know if it was a state visitor or OPEC meeting or something like that, and Putin gave.
That's kind of high.
That's a totally misunderstood gesture in the West. It's not approving. It's saying continuity. We continue. Okay, you're the power source of power in Saudi Arabia. I am the source of power in Russia, and states continue. Okay, it doesn't mean you condone or appreciate something. There has to be a higher level of maturity here, which obviously these elites in the West don't have.
No, that's a very good point, because the whole point of these meetings, these summits, and is that you are there as the representative, as the embodiment of that state. You're not there because you're such a great guy and everyone loves you and you should be here. That's probably how people like Trudeau, Justin Trudeau thinks. Hey, I'm here because I'm such a great guy. I mean, you're there as the representative of your state. And therefore, as the representative of your state, you have to show, as in the case of Saudi Arabia, that we are colleagues and partners and that we will work together. So when he did that friendly gesture, they kind of slapped hands. It was like, hey, Russia and Saudi Arabia will continue to be friends.
And that's why you have to cut some of these leaders a little bit of slack. They have to talk to Justin Trudeau. God help them all. You're the president of France. You have to talk. Trudeau's on the phone.
Right.
What do you want? Okay.
Yes, that's right.
Is he wearing a dress or blackface?
I have to say that whole thing that I think it was a Tucker Carlson. He had that montage of pictures because he had the blackface, and then he did that Indian thing.
And then he had the cowboy hat.
Yeah, the cowboy hat. The whole thing, but I mean, the whole idea of you doing this sort of thing, it's just such buffoonery on his part. I have to say I'm completely baffled by how the Canadians can vote for someone like that. I mean, like, you look at Gavin Newsom, a kind of a vacuous figure like Gavin. Oh, well, that's California. What can you expect from California? But I don't know. It doesn't say much for a country that votes for someone like Justin Trudeau.
The way it was explained to me, it's not that he's popular, just that the opposition hasn't been able to act together. Right. That's more of a default situation here. But I think his election fortunes are just completely shot. I mean, this whole trucker thing. God bless them all for having courage to stand up to this wimp. Okay, and the wimpy media of Canada. Most Canadian media is state controlled, everybody, okay? Like most countries in the world, okay? Like most countries in the world.
That's true enough. So we have a super chat from Red Z. Thank you very much, Red. He says, the US as bad faith actor limits options in game theory. US-Russia relations, no Russian soldier ever called me evil racist. I think, to the extent that I understand it, I mean, it was the... when Muhammad Ali famously he was inducted into the army, and he said that I don't have no quarrel with them Viet Cong. No Viet Cong ever called me a nigger. And I think what he was saying there is that I don't actually have any quarrel, and it's a kind of an interesting issue. I mean, generally about war. Why are we fighting this war? I mean, I don't have any problem with these people. I've always had good relations with them. And, my problem is with, America and so on. Even though Ali kind of exaggerated. I mean, this is the person
and
who was
it's one of
fated,
and it's one of the reasons why we loved him, okay? Because I loved his hyperbole, okay? He was in your face and he made you think about uncomfortable things. And Muhammad Ali, when he was forced and he was conscripted into the army, and all he was saying is that, why are you conscripting me into this army to kill people when I don't have the same rights as white people in my own country? That's a pretty good argument, I think. I think that's telling.
Yeah, no, there's no question. And he took a very, heroic stance, because let's remember when this whole thing started in 1966, the war was very popular. Ali was not at all a popular figure at that time. I mean, now, he's looked back upon as a very beloved figure. Everyone, sings the praises of Ali. Oh, he took a stand against the Vietnam War, and, it was a very, very risky thing to do in 1966 to take a stand against the Vietnam War. It was popular. All the media were in favor of it. They all supported this. So, after all, there was a reason why he was stripped of the title. They thought this was a popular move, to strip him of his title. And no one shed any tears, incidentally, when he was stripped of his title. So, he went around. I mean, he had difficulties actually making a living because he suddenly had no more money. So he had to go around giving these public lectures. Because just to raise some money, but that's just a reflection of the fact that he was a man who stuck by his principles, and he said, "I'm not going to do it. I don't have a problem with them."
I suggest everybody go into YouTube and type Bill Buckley and Muhammad Ali. It's a fascinating. It was on firing line, absolutely fascinating. And what was really interesting is that Muhammad Ali was not a deferential type person by nature, but he was sitting there with Bill Buckley, and he was very complimentary. You're a smart guy, you're well educated. And he was saying about himself, I'm not particularly well educated, but they sparred. And there's actually one line, and it is absolutely hysterical. So you have little Bill Buckley sitting there, as he would sit like a crow all the time. Remember the board. And Muhammad Ali, giant,
huge man,
and they started, kind of squabbling a little bit. It's not like we're going to fight, are we? It was actually, and it took a lot of the pressure down, okay, and it made Ali laugh too. He was no one's fool, okay, and I remember him growing up. And George is right. I mean, particularly in the elites, Muhammad Ali was something they just couldn't.
No.
He was known as Cassius Clay also at that time. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And because he changed his name to Muhammad Ali after his victory over Sonny Liston. So that was February '64, and he said, my name is Muhammad Ali. But many people refused to call him Muhammad Ali. I mean, they just said, no, he's Cassius Clay, and including a number of the black boxers that he actually fought. They just kept calling him Cassius Clay. Why should I call you Muhammad Ali? I mean, that's not your name. Your name is Cassius Clay. Those are the boxers that he treated very cruelly in the ring. So that was the unpleasant side of Ali. I think he was quite cruel to people in the ring, in a way that I think was very bad, because look, to be a boxer, you have to be very brave. I mean, to go into the ring and even if you're not as skillful as Ali, you're not a coward, you're not a rabbit. And when he insulted them, calling them a rabbit and so on, hey, look, you're taking your life in your hands when you go into a ring, so you're not a coward, you're not a rabbit. So that was a very cruel side to Ali as well.
But it's kind of interesting, because that's when boxing became so popularized, because it was more of a drama. And what is he going to say next? I mean, It was something new, and we've never seen that before. No. It was basically just two big, huge guys, and I watched it in black and white because that's what we had growing up. Okay, he turned it into something that was much more popular. I mean, songs written about him, and then cartoons about him. One of the very first action figures ever made. And of course, everybody was taking money out of his pockets, left, right, and center.
Yeah, no, well, that's another side of it. I mean, it's in other words, I mean, he was this, a glamorous figure in the '60s and then '70s, but then he became a tragic figure. I mean, and not just because of his health, which very seriously deteriorated. But as you say, because all these people who were around him, they were just rubbing him blind. And there, I think his Black Muslim activism really undermined him, because a lot of these people were just hanging around him, from his Black Muslim activities, and they were just robbing him. They were just stealing like mad, and he didn't have anyone. He for some reason, he never appointed anyone serious to take care of his finances.
Unfortunately, I don't know how many children he had, but he had at least a daughter. And she was
he had a number of children, not a lot of children.
The one particular daughter, I wish I could remember her name, she started to defend him, but it was just too late in the game. I mean, this guy was a multi-million-dollar, source of income, and she was just a tot. She couldn't protect her father. And there were so many people that didn't want him to be protected, okay? I mean, his copyright stuff, all this stuff in the media, it was just all taken from him.
It was all taken from him. And it was a terrible thing, because, because there was just such incompetence, he'd be selling the same copyright to different people. I mean, it's like, well, I'll sell this copyright here, but once you've sold the copyright, you can't very well sell it again. So, often he was getting himself into very serious trouble. And then, because of his deteriorating health, he really couldn't do much in the way of endorsements. So a man like him, with his stature, should have been absolutely in clover for the rest of his life through, doing all these endorsements and everything else. But
just his image.
Yeah. But he didn't do that. But again, you have to say that, his courage in actually being quite as open as he was about his health. I mean, he would appear in public, and he knew that what an impact it had when people suddenly saw him, and they'd be shocked by, wow, this is Ali, and he's just trembling. I mean, he can't even walk. He has to be, carried by people, and he was unafraid. I mean, he showed himself. Yeah, that's me now. That's who I am now. And
that's why he was the greatest. Like
yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's right. It's, because you would have thought, okay, now he'll hide from the public. Like movie actresses, who were once glamorous. Once they get old, they hide from the public. They don't want people to see what they look like now. But he was upfront, about his condition.
And he only died a few years ago.
Yeah. And relatively young. I think it must have been about 74, 70. Yeah, I think it was probably about 74. Yeah.
For those of you, George and I are older generation. It's just really hard to impress upon you the impact that this big black boxer was in our lives, because there was I grew up in a lily white community outside of Denver, Colorado. There were no minorities at all, and when there would be these big fights, it would be all myself and my friends. We would like, it's tonight. And my parents were like, what? Who? Right. And where are they hearing this from and all that? I mean, with my cohort, he was just a superhero, and my parents couldn't understand, where did these kids learn this stuff? That's
right. Yeah, no, that's right. And of course, his first fight with Joe Frazier was a kind of a global event. I mean, everybody in the world was obsessed with it. I mean, everybody was talking about it. And I was just a little kid at the time, but everybody that you met had nothing else to talk about but who will win the big fight. I mean, but again, at the time, Ali was by no means the beloved figure. Many people supported Joe Frazier. They wanted, Ali to be shown up, as a braggart, as a nasty piece of work. So there was a lot of people rejoicing that Frazier won.
And there also was the element of his religion, which I can remember, because my father would refer to Ali by his original name, and I would say, well, why does he call himself Muhammad Ali? I had no idea what Islam was. I mean, everyone was Christian, right, George? I mean, that's right. Brought up. Why everybody was Christian? And and for people, young people, there was, what's that? Where's that come from? And it was, and why have a different name? And of course, why do you dislike him? Explain what. And no one.
No, that's right. That's right. Yeah. But it's very funny, if you look at some of the when they replay some of the old fights, and And I think when they have his parents show up for a fight and the interviewer talks to them, he calls the parents by their name, Mr. Clay. Well, Mr. Clay, what do you think of your son? Well, I think my son's doing really well. And then again, and Mrs. Clay, don't you get a little worried, when you see your son in the ring? Yeah, I get a little worried, but then it's okay. But it's kind of, they knew that's still the parents, they have the same name, Mr. Clay, Mrs. Clay. And he said, I'm not going to be Clay. I'm not going to, that's a slave owner's name. Don't call me by the slave owner's name. But they still retain the slave owner's name.
Well, everybody, I mean, if you, I'm a little hesitant to suggest this, but nonetheless, there is a Netflix series called the Godfather of Brooklyn, and it is a highly fictionalized story about Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali. But I do suggest it not for pure historical record, but it does give you a sense of the personalities of these people, and the actors that play them are absolutely brilliant. And the storyline is very compelling. Don't take it as gospel. It's kind of like Oliver Stone stuff. But it's, if that's the only thing you know about him, about Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X, I'm happy, okay? Because they portray them in a positive way, in an honest way. But the things that they do in the TV series, take it with a grain of salt.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I mean, it's a piece of history. I mean, again, if you look at that fight, that 1971 fight between Ali and Frazier, the people who showed up, they all look like out of some movie from the 1970s. They're all dressed like pimps, like that style, which was in the 70s.
That lounge style, yeah.
That's lounge style with those hats and everything. They
Elton John glasses.
That's it, yeah. They somehow they managed to get into that. I guess Ali got them in there, but they were in there. They all look like pimps. But yeah, those are the people who were kind of hanging around Ali at the time. But it was a huge kind of New York event. I mean, to get in, I don't know. There was no way you would get in unless you knew somebody who knew Frank Sinatra or something like that. So.
Everybody loves the star power, don't they?
Right. Yeah.
And then as we've mentioned, how he his twilight years, the hypocrisy of these people. Okay, they didn't take care of they called him a friend. They didn't take care of him like a friend. No,
that's right. I think it really is just quite horrific because he lived, he didn't live in poverty. Like Joe Frazier actually lived in poverty during his last years. He just had a little room in a gym somewhere. Again, it was called Joe Frazier's gym, but that was his home. He just lived there. So Ali lived a little bit above that, but just quite a modest middle class life. I mean, not, you would think after all the money that he earned and could have earned, he'd be living in some, somewhere in Wilshire Boulevard. No, I mean, it's, that money was just pissed away. I mean, look at, it goes back, Joe Louis,
But George, I mean, I'm not a particularly big fan of fight films, okay? Except for $1 Million Baby, which I think Clint Eastwood made a brilliant film about that female boxer. I thought it was just absolutely one of his best films he ever made. But I'm not a real big boxing fan. But if he had real friends, he could have been executive producer on some of these films. He could have. What is executive producer? It can mean everything. It can mean nothing. Okay, and it's just somebody getting paid. Okay. You get part of the box office, and you get to put your name, and oh wow, executive director Muhammad Ali. That would have been something. They wouldn't even do that. Not that I'm aware of, anyway.
Yeah, no, that's right. It is quite amazing that didn't happen. And then the same thing with Joe Louis. I mean, given again his stature and how when he defeated Max Schmeling, he was celebrated, great national hero. FDR kind of patted him, on the back. What a great man. And you'd think, hey, that's it. I can dine out on this. And then how did he spend his remaining years? he was a greeter. He was a greeter in a club in Florida, just a greeter. Hey, this is Joe Louis. You shake hands with them, and that's what you get paid to do. You just shake hands with people, and that's it. So, all the money was just gone. All the money that he had made. It's very, very.
Just to point out to everyone, George and I are quite versatile. Okay, we're not talking about our stuff right now, but
that's right. But
but I mean, this is these are the origins of pop culture, of mass pop culture. Okay,
right.
I mean, Muhammad Ali's name and image has probably made more money than since he died than when he was alive. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, that's right. That's and like that famous photograph. I'm sure most people have seen it. Was when he posed with the Beatles. The Beatles came to visit him when he was training, and then it's a nice picture. He punches one, and then they all kind of topple over. Yeah, exactly, all four of them. It was apparently a spontaneous thing. I mean, no, it wasn't that rehearsed it or anything. But what was funny, and somebody who was actually there who took that photograph, I remember he's saying that. Ali had no idea who they were. I mean, it's like, that was sort of white culture. He had nothing to do with any of that. When they left, he turned to somebody and said, who were those little faggots?
That's the way he talked. That's the way he talked.
That's right, exactly. Because to them, it's like, who are these people? These rather weedy little Englishmen, I mean, I guess he automatically thought Englishmen, were.
Yeah, I really like cinema, and the time that George has just referred to, this is when they still had green books in the South, okay, where you had complete segregation. So a green book was where Black people, hotels, restaurants, bars, and it was like an atlas for them where you could go. And I suggest everyone go see the film Green Book, because it's very, very good, very, very thoughtful. And if you haven't seen it, it's not exactly what you think it is. There's actually, they explore a lot of different things that you wouldn't expect, in a quote unquote race film, okay? Right. Because it's more complicated than that, more nuanced, more sophisticated, and it is really uplifting too. I really appreciate it. I thought it was extremely well made, wonderful acting.
Right. Anyway, we have another super chat from our friend Spectre in the Air. Thank you so much, Spectre. And it says, speaking of the Vietnam draft, read McNamara's Folly, truly evil. Now, McNamara was a really a poisonous figure. He was the Pentagon chief in the Kennedy administration, carried on well into the Johnson administration, and then of course he bailed out on Johnson, and but got the golden parachute of becoming president of the World Bank. If you actually ever see that, I think it's in that film. The one was made by his name escapes me. It was based all on interviews with McNamara. And then when he goes there and he sort of, basically Johnson is saying goodbye to him. And then McNamara comes to the microphone and he just says, I can't say anything. I'm just overcome by emotion. And he just doesn't say anything. He just leaves. And he never said anything about Vietnam. That he left in 1967, never said anything at all until pretty much at the end of his life. I mean, I think when he did those interviews in that film, I think it was called Shadow of War or the Fog of War, something like that.
There were a few times that he was at a public forum, and it was about economic growth, sustainable, those kind of things. And then someone in the crowd say, I was sent to Hanoi. I was sent to Saigon in '67, and then they rip right into him. And that's why he made so few public appearances, because there was always that chance that someone was going to come out and really go after him. McNamara is such a complicated guy. For me, he's kind of the prototypical 20th century man, where you think being a technocrat. He's one of these original technocrat. Fauci is one of these people.
The very essence of a technocrat
is one of these people. Yeah. McNamara was, the prototype. in many ways.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. He believed that, all you need to do is you crunch the numbers, and then if you crunch the numbers, run the computer program, you would figure out, how many bombs and how much, megaton explosives you need to win a war. I mean, that's exactly how he thought. That's what, that's what he did at the Pentagon. He revolutionized their procurement process. Didn't do much good, but that's the kind of thing he loved doing. This kind of nerdy number crunching. That's what he did when he was president of Ford. But he never really questioned anything that he was doing. I mean, he was involved in the firebombing of Tokyo, bombing in World War II. He never really questioned the justification, that do we really need to be killing so many civilians? And then again, Vietnam, he never questioned anything he was doing. And
and I mean, what makes him a cowardly figure is that he was the one, and this is extremely well documented. He was, the anchor that kept pushing Johnson to escalate and escalate. Yeah. And then it got to the point where his numbers wouldn't only crunch defeat. And he basically told Johnson, it's unwinnable. And Johnson said, what?
That's right.
What did I do for you? I listened to you.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's why it was such a contemptible performance that when he exits, and he's there with Johnson. Johnson thanks him for all his service, and then he says nothing. I'm overcome with emotion. I can't say anything. The whole idea that a grown man, whatever, he was 60 years old, he's so overcome with emotion, he can't say anything. It was totally contemptible. And then he goes off, becomes the president of the World Bank, living on happily ever after, while Johnson, disappears in ignominy, dies of a broken heart a few years later. But he just, continues. And then I don't know what he did after that. I mean, I think, then he wrote these essays in the New York Review of Books about the danger of nuclear war. That became his mantra. How do we stop nuclear war? And then finally he says, and after all the silence all these years, and what does he say at the end? Well, we got it wrong. We just didn't know enough. We lost all these Asia experts in the State Department. No, plenty of people knew. We don't need no stinking Asia experts in the State Department. Plenty of people knew that this is a ridiculous war for the same reason that you're involved. Yeah, go.
Read the Pentagon Papers that you instituted. You came up with the idea that you have analysts write the entire history of the war in Indochina. You commissioned that.
He commissioned, and he never read it. That was amazing. He never read it. I mean, it's like they wrote that. Again, he just walked away and just left them to fend for themselves. So he asked them to write that history. And then he left. He said, what about this history that we've been working on all these years? No, I don't care. I've got other fish to fry. So they didn't know really what to do with it. And of course, then they kept passing it around. What should we do with this report? Until finally, Daniel Ellsberg said, okay, well,
I know what to do.
I'll release it to the public. Exactly. But it was typical of him that he just sort of, he just kind of walked away from it. And then say, oh, well, we got it wrong because we didn't have all these Asia experts. Well, anyone could have said, look, the Vietnamese care a lot more about their country than you care about the Vietnamese. Just like Ukraine, we're going to stand with Ukraine. No, this is an existential matter for Russia. It's peripheral to anything that you may be concerned with. So you're just posturing that this is a huge, important issue for you. No, it's not.
Yeah, but I'm really glad you brought it up to the president, because what have they learned, George?
Right.
Basically nothing.
Right.
Okay. The war on terror in the Middle East. What outcome was that? Utter failure, destruction.
Right.
And a media that got comfortable covering for lies.
Right. Right. That's right. That's it. Yeah, that's right. And when they got themselves involved in Ukraine, again, there was no real cost for them. I mean, it's like, Americans talk about the trauma of Vietnam. Hey, it's a hell of a lot bigger trauma for the Vietnamese. I mean, it was their country that was actually being bombed. It's not like the United States was being bombed by the Vietnamese. It was their country that was being bombed. And it was, their country that was being devastated. So, but no, it's a trauma. It's a big, big trauma. We got to get over this, the Vietnam trauma.
It's really interesting. The Western media, particularly the Fox types, like to talk about the CCP. They go on and on about the CCP. But Vietnam's a communist country also. Okay, and the interesting thing is that there's very good trade links, or at least at present trade links between Vietnam and the United States. My brother, for example, younger brother, he married a girl from Vietnam, ethnic Chinese girl from Vietnam. She was a quote unquote boat person, and the government policy, and it's enforced, is that in Vietnam you can criticize the American war against Vietnam, but once it's over, there are friends, and you can't criticize them. Right. So, I mean, talk about kind of compartmentalizing trauma.
Right. So, by the way, we've had a couple of super chats from Fred Smith. There wasn't any question attached to that. or at least I don't see it. So thank you so much, Fred. Very much appreciate that. I think it's very interesting. But of course, the Americans did promise the Vietnamese reconstruction aid as part of the peace agreement that was signed in Paris in 1973. That never materialized. That never materialized, that reconstruction aid. I mean, fine, you don't want to give reconstruction aid, don't give reconstruction aid. But if you promise that you're going to do it and then you don't do it, it's not a good look. So
there were a lot of individuals, former veterans, of their own accord, that went back and built schools and things like that. It was a private thing, but yeah, right. I remember that. I never, even at the tender young age I had, I don't think they're going to get any money. Okay.
No, I don't think that's. I mean, they made then a lot of talk about this, the prisoners of war, the American prisoners of war that were allegedly held back by the Vietnamese. The problem is I never really saw any convincing evidence that they held them back, and I don't even understand what the motives would have been. Yeah, why hold them back? Because if you hold them back and then you say afterward, let's say 5 years later, hey, well, we've discovered some more people. I mean, what do you gain by it? I mean, I just. Well,
there's one thing, it's an uncomfortable thing to mention, and it's been mentioned in more alternative media, but there were U.S. servicemen that changed sides or just gave up in the war and stayed.
Yes.
Okay. And they got a house and have a family, and they just blended in. You got to remember, there was a lot of mixing, if you know what I mean, George, during that war, and you had the offspring. There was a lot of that going on here. And if you're from a poor family in America, they make you go to war. You realize, why am I doing this? Why am I here? These are not bad people.
Right.
Flip. At least you know English. You can, I mean, there's a lot of them that did that. It even happened during the Korean War, that is not talked about.
No, I think it's a very good point. It's a very interesting point, because exactly it happens, and then rather than admit that this happened, because they may well have just deserted. They deserted. So if you're a deserter, that already becomes a kind of a problem. What's the government going to do with you? So if you deserted and then you go on live with the quote enemy unquote, then it's much better just to pretend, oh, he was killed in action. And then, they came up with, like Ross Perot and all the others, made a whole stink out of this. I mean, that's kind of how Ross Perot became so famous, because, I mean, yeah, I know, he made some money, but, so what? He made some money doing all this.
Well, and it spawned the whole Rambo thing.
Right, exactly. But yeah, but he wrote books about it, and he got very involved in the whole hunt for these prisoners of war. But the amazing thing is that they never proved any of it. They never came up with a single person, one person who was alive, and they can say, hey, here's the one person. And then we found one who was held back, and they lied to us about him, and he was alive all these years. Not one. So it was a kind of a fantasy that went on, I guess, into the 1990s. I mean, up until Ross Perot's presidential campaign.
Yeah.
So,
but I remember the bracelets people had. Remember,
right.
you get a bracelet
right.
of service, and it was missing in action and all that.
Yeah.
And then you had Deer Hunter. I mean, I remember the whole post-Vietnam War experience. But Desert Storm fixed that, George.
That fixed that, exactly. Now we've got overall Vietnam syndrome. Well, the Deer Hunter was a kind of quite extraordinary, because remember, they at the heart of the Deer Hunter was the Russian roulette sequences, and again, no evidence was ever presented that this is something that the Vietnamese did. They played Russian roulette. But the thrust of the movie was, well, that the Vietnamese are kind of evil, decadent, corrupt, and they kind of corrupted our fine American youth. So you had that. You remember that opening, that long opening about these wonderful immigrant families, that wedding and so on. Yeah, the wedding went on and on and on, and now they're here among these horrible, corrupt, decadent people.
I think you can take something differently from that. I think that's a fair enough description. But I think the roulette thing, I don't even believe it actually even happened. Okay, but it was much more the chance of life. Okay, I think that's what it was. What they were trying to. I mean, why are these immigrant children fighting in Southeast Asia? It's like roulette. Okay, it just. Wrong place, wrong time. It's your fate. I mean,
right.
if you make it back home, is it because you're a better person, you're a better fighter, you're smarter, you're more cunning, or you just got lucky?
Right.
Right. I mean, when you look at all of those guys, I mean, remember when they were singing? I don't even want to sing because I don't have a. I love you, baby.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And what was interesting is that they were all singing it in unison, and they were all part of the same community. And they were kind of looking at the same girls, joking, and then their ethnic background is interacting with domestic American culture, and it's just these working class boys, and then you put them into a pit in Vietnam. And what the hell happens? You don't, and I think that's one of the things that you have no idea what would. I always tell people that we can look at these films from the outside looking in, but just think about how would you react in that? Would you have your humanity? What would it take you to shoot your own fellow soldier to survive? Okay, I think there's a whole lot of and that's why I think the film is really good, because it's just about luck.
Right. No, I think so. I mean, I think that's certainly part of it. I mean, the reason that I kind of saw it a little differently, because I think it starts off with that very long sequence, as you said. These are immigrant families, working class boys, Americana. This is what America is about. And then suddenly they're thrown into this cesspool. And it's not just because this is a war and war is hell. But it's that there's this decadence, and the decadence, it seems like they're almost saying that it's coming from the French. The French kind of introduced this decadence to Vietnam with all these horrible clubs and these underground clubs where they're practicing these Russian roulette and so on. And that's why one of them, the Robert De Niro character, you say he's lucky. He gets it. I mean 3 out of 6. I mean, he had put 3 bullets in there. Those are not good odds. It's
not easy to watch even to this day.
No, it really isn't. It really isn't. That's a very hard. That's a tough scene. Yeah. And then you got that Christopher Walken, who normally I don't like, but here he's a kind of a very touching character because he doesn't make it. He stays on in Vietnam because he's hooked on these decadent games, drugs presumably as well.
But war makes everyone decadent. Okay,
Right.
that's what I think. I mean, obviously there was an attempt. Yeah, I was very aware of it to portray the Vietnamese as barbaric. Okay, obviously that was a message there. But war creates barbarism, and all of those guys, just regular, we knew guys like that in high school. Okay, right. And then they're playing Russian roulette. They become very different people. They became very, very detached, and the norms of what we would consider morality just simply disappear. And the remarkable thing is how many of the ones that never really changed, and then that's kind of weird in itself. Okay, that's weird in itself, because why did everyone else, so many others, fall apart? And then there's the case of F this, I'm getting out of here. Okay. Yeah. And that scene we see, they just, it's, that's right. It's all roulette. Either we make it or we don't. It's a binary, and we're going to find out in about 3 seconds.
That's right. So we've got a couple more super chats from our friend, Fred Smith. Thank you so much, Fred. That's very, very kind of you. And then Spectre in the Air, another super chat from him. Thank you so much. He says, I beg to differ. VC were evil to POWs, personally known soldiers from Sante Raid. No, I think that's right. And we're not in any way saying that the VC were good guys.
I mean, no, they weren't.
And that is documented that they did treat their prisoners of war very harshly. It's just that on this issue, with the Russian roulette, I mean, I've not heard anyone say that they actually did practice this Russian roulette on the prisoners of war. But no question. I mean, in terms of Geneva Conventions, no, they didn't follow the Geneva Conventions. And as far as I know, I don't think North Vietnam was a signatory of the Geneva Convention. Yeah. So I think, I don't think.
I mean, I want to add to that point. Okay, I don't want to gloss over anything. My father fought in the Second World War. He was at Iwo Jima and Okinawa. He never fired a shot in anger. He was a ship's yeoman, which means he was the secretary. He got the job because he could type. It might have saved his life because he could type. But he had a hatred for the Japanese all of his life, because, I mean, he only talked about it with me twice because he didn't like talking about it. And the reason why he had a hatred is that, why do they keep fighting? They're going to lose this. They're not going to beat us. Then you continue, and just seeing the absolute slaughter. And that's what made him angry. He said it was just senseless slaughter, nonstop.
Yeah. That's a very good point.
And that brutalizes people. It's really interesting is that, I think it's, I always get the title. Is it Thick Green Line or Thin Green Line? And it was about the war in the Pacific. And wars about Europe and wars about Pacific are very, very different, okay? Because the wars were fought in very, very different ways. And it was very gruesome in the Pacific because when we think of Europe, it's, you're flanking with your tanks and, it's big stuff. In the Pacific, it was just inch by inch by inch. Yeah. And the brutalization that was that happened there. So yeah, but having said that, the Japanese treated their own troops only a little bit better than they treated Americans. They were just brutal. Okay,
that's right. I think that's all very good points. The Japanese. I mean, even the very folly of attacking America. You think it's just nuts. You're not going to win this war. I mean, there's no way that you're going to defeat the United States. I mean, okay, you got this, destroyed the Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, but America's going to, I mean, it's a giant industrial powerhouse. It was by far the biggest economy in the world. Of course, they're going to come back and they're going to beat you. But you're right. I mean, they just even after it was obvious they were going to lose this war, they just continued to fight. But I mean, it's interesting what you said about how the Japanese treated their own people, because if you remember the Bridge on the River Kwai, which is a very good film, you remember when the British officer Nicholson, played by Alec Guinness, he said, "Well, the Geneva Convention state, this is how prisoners of war must be treated." He says, "Well, you must be joking. You're not prisoners of war. You are coolies. You surrendered. You gave up your guns. Therefore, you don't deserve any respect. We Japanese, we fight by a soldier's code. A soldier never surrenders. We continue to fight. You didn't. You surrendered. You gave up your guns. So therefore, you must do slave labor. I mean, you're coolies." And I think it's kind of interesting that it was their mentality. So you don't deserve to be treated decently. Why would we? I mean, and I think that was the Japanese. Interestingly enough, Stalin had the same attitude towards Russians who surrendered. I mean, which is why his own son, which is why when they were released by the Allies to be sent back to the Soviet Union, they were all straight on to Siberia. There was no freedom for you.
I had a very good friend of mine who passed away, unfortunately, a few years ago of cancer, but his father fought in the Soviet army, and he was captured, and he was put in a prisoner of war camp in Germany. And as the Red Army was coming, the Nazis just abandoned everything. They left them there. His father and a few other Russians said, "We surrendered. They surrounded us. We surrendered. We didn't fight." And what they did was they just made it. They just went as far west as they could. And when Stalin was saying, "Well, I want my people back," my friend's father and a few others convinced the Allies, no, we'll be dead. Okay, let us keep moving. And they ended up sending them to the U.S. They were just to displace people. Right. And a lot of them got away that way. Okay?
Right, that's right. But that became a huge controversy back in the 1970s. You remember when Nikolai Tolstoy wrote about this, and then Nicholas Bethel, I think, also wrote about this, because they thought it was very immoral for the Allies then to hand these people over. And it was a hard decision, because ultimately
really hard.
Because there were wartime agreements. I mean, these were wartime agreements, which is all powers, all of the three Allied powers hand over prisoners of war. And that's what you're supposed to do. You're a prisoner of war. That means you're still under command. You're under the command of the Red Army. So you have to be essentially transferred back to your commanding officers. And they were saying, no, these are terrible. And a lot of you're right. A lot of people, they just look the other way and say, "Oh no, whoa, they escaped. I didn't know what happened. I turned around and he escaped." But many were handed over, and they did indeed. Boom! They were sent straight onto Siberia. I mean, so there was, you spent all these years in German captivity, then you went off to the Gulag.
Interesting story. I had a Russian girlfriend when I first moved here, and I met her grandfather. He was injured twice during the war, and for some very minor infraction, he was sent to a work camp because he was injured. He was no longer valuable as a soldier, but he had because of some kind of infraction. I met him and talked to him a few times. He never told me what that was, but he found himself in a work camp. Then in the early 50s, he was released and he went back to Moscow. And lo and behold, he was a good driver. He ended up being a chauffeur in the Kremlin. Yeah. And Stalin was still alive. And I'll never forget, it was one of the funniest experiences of my life. Me just being kind of gullible and wanting to know. I said, "Well, so you were in the carpool?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, did you ever drive Stalin?" And he said, "Do you think I looked back? I was injured twice and I was in a work camp. Why would I look back?"
The funny thing is, of course, because the Bolsheviks had destroyed the Imperial Army, through their propaganda, and they turned, the army into a rabble. As Putin always talks, hey, Russians don't run away, but they did run away in World War I, thanks to the activities of the Bolsheviks. So because the Bolsheviks knew about, what happens, they treated the army with extraordinary brutality. I mean, can you imagine? The Imperial Army would never have treated their soldiers in this way. Hey, you surrendered, boom, you're off to the Gulag with you. But the Bolsheviks, they were just absolutely inhuman. Hey, you gave up your gun, that's it. You're essentially collaborating with the enemy. So that's the Bolsheviks were infinitely more cruel than the horrible imperial authorities that they rebelled against.
Yes, and plus I think it was it was 25 years service after serfdom came to an end, and so that was people just waiting. It was just I got to wait 25 years to go back to the village. Okay, I mean they were. The peasant armies, they did not invest a whole lot into. But one thing they did do, George, is make sure there weren't peasant uprisings. One of the reasons for conscription, to keep an eye on everybody.
That's right. Yeah. So we have another super chat from our friend Fred Smith. Thank you so much, Fred. It's very, very kind of you. And then we have a question from a friend who we haven't seen in a while, Ryan McDonald from the USA. Hi, Ryan. It says, is Pax Americana a threat, foreign or domestic? You want to tackle that one, Peter?
Is Pax Americana a threat?
A threat. So presumably, is it threatened at the moment?
It's being challenged. Absolutely, it's being challenged. American hegemony is being challenged all over the world, and that's why we have such a reactionary foreign policy. This is like a wounded animal. It will do very unexpected things. Ned Price is, I mean, George and I will do our thumbs up, thumbs down tomorrow. We'll go in greater length on it. But I mean, that performance of that guy, that's insanity, okay? That is Pax Americana afraid, all right? I mean, and looking for conflicts and wars that are so completely unnecessary.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, they're making a calculation. Which other powers have made in the past, which is that the only way we can retain our supremacy, our position as number one, is by knocking out rivals. Whether through provoking some kind of a conflict, and then you knock them out, and then you knock out the first, and then you knock out the second. They rarely work according to plan. I mean, it's like, it's kind of what Germany was thinking about before World War I. We are, our power is gradually becoming diminished. France is rapidly industrializing. Russia's rapidly industrializing. America is already number one in the world in terms of its economy. So we've only got a small window whereby we can still retain our power. And so they made some kind of a calculation. If we can provoke a conflict, we can knock out Russia. Russia will be, out of running for a long time. Then we can deal with France, and that'll be it. And we'll still be number one for a long time to come. It doesn't work that way, and I think the Americans are going to find the same problem, which is that you keep doing this with NATO. You're trying to provoke something with Russia, and you think that that's going to work to your advantage. It's a tall order. I mean, if it doesn't work to your advantage, then you're disaster, because
what it does is
wars don't go your way, then disaster beckons.
But see, again, this is kind of like game theory, is that this current gambit is obviously failed, okay, as we speak right now. Is that going to embolden a more audacious gambit? That's what we have to worry about also. Right. And there's so many moving pieces. See, when they said, I think it goes back to the end of November, imminent invasion. Well, that's when you get people mobilized, get the adrenaline up, but then now it's February, and it's like, where's the immediacy of all of this? And then as people realize there is no immediacy, then why are we making a commitment? And it's all falling to pieces right now. Right. Okay. Right. As George and I more or less predicted as well. But the inability to see, it's a Thucydides trap. Okay, this is what the U.S. is in right now. Okay, either you accept your diminishing role on the world stage. In many ways, you could say the UK did that after the Second World War. The second one is negotiate, spheres of influence. We'll do this, we'll do that. We won't bother each other. And or the third variant is war. Okay, right. And that's
I think that's a very good point. But then you say it's an interesting thing, because you could say, let's say United States policymakers and the UK policymakers are calculating, all right, we've got Europe, we can basically consolidate Europe into this NATO. We're still going to try and make inroads into Central Asia, the Far East. But on the other hand, maybe through your mistakes or whatever, you've now created this Russia-Chinese alliance. And then you have to think, who's going to dominate this continent? You got the Halford Mackinder theory, Zbigniew Brzezinski. Everything is going to depend on who's going to dominate this continent. And if they think, US policymakers think that the history is going in the direction of the Russia-China axis, then that's when leaders start making decisions and say, we can't allow this to happen. We cannot be, become a diminished power, so that in a generation's time, we are firmly number two. That's when people start making calculations for war. And I still think that's a distinct likelihood. I mean,
I think it's a very distinct likelihood. And as you pointed out, you brought up the example of Germany watching its window of opportunity slowly close. This is happening to the US right now, okay? Right. Because if you look at, I'm not an economist, but I think by all intents and purposes, China is at least equal to the US, if not larger now, economically speaking. And this whole exercise of NATO saber rattling, one of the interesting results, two interesting things that's important, we'll talk about this on Crosstalk tomorrow, is that they've pretty much understood really what the Russians are interested in, and they know the assets the Russians have to back it up. They've learned, this is what the NATO has learned about Russia, okay? And who else has learned that? China has learned that. It's no coincidence. George and I talked about this yesterday. The opening of the Olympic Games, and then the Chinese and the Russians come out with a very detailed and very emphatic communique. Something that took me a bit aback, to be honest with you. It's very specific, detailed. Okay, this wasn't boilerplate, George.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah, because obviously it was a very, very long document, and so there was some boilerplate about climate change and whatnot. But on very specific issues that we're very concerned with, it's very specific about NATO, opposition to NATO expansion. So that means China says, we've got your back to Russia on this issue. And the Russians in turn say not just, we subscribe to the one China policy, but the Russians say any kind of independence for Taiwan is unacceptable. So they went beyond just simply, one China, one China. No, any kind of independence for Taiwan is unacceptable. So in other words, they're both saying, we've got your back should you get into a conflict with rival powers. And so people say, but there's no military alliance. Well, they're not going to sign a military alliance because they don't want to antagonize. I mean, you sign a military alliance, then you've lost India. India is just going to say, hey, we're very frightened of this. So, why would you want to scare other powers off? But in reality, de facto, it is an alliance. I mean, they're basically going to be in support, do whatever they need to do in support of the other, should either get into a conflict.
Yes, and also part of the Russian constitution is that Russia cannot be go into a strategic foreign alliance like that. No, it's they're not trying to rebuild the Soviet Union. Everyone, okay? Russia. The interesting, George. Now that we're mentioning it, I always find it hilarious how rebuilding the Soviet Union, imperial ambitions. If you look, since 1991. With the advent of the Russian Federation, they've only wanted one thing, George: to keep what they have.
Yeah, that's right. That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
To keep what they have.
Exactly. And in fact, I mean, they haven't kept what they had, because not only did they lose the Warsaw Pact and watch the Warsaw Pact essentially go over to the side of the enemy, they lost. Republics of the USSR. So they, the three Baltic states have joined the hostile military alliance, and then they've seen this hostile military alliance trying to incorporate more of these republics of the USSR. So, keep what they have, basically against these continuing encroachments. And that's a really serious situation to be in. Anyway, we've got some more super chats. So we got, hey man, there's got another thing like, hey man, says, too many fictional crusades for them to handle at the same time. Let the East rise in peace and the West continue to evolve graciously. I think that's right. I think it's ultimately you just have to allow other powers to rise up and and claim their place in the sun, or their to be there, because it's very, very hard to stop some other power from developing and becoming a great power. You can't really do it unless you invade or or something even nastier. So you just have to accept it. I mean, there it is. Yeah.
But that's the arc of history, George. I mean, I don't know what these policy thinkers, well, I know what the policy thinkers in the UK and the US think, is that this is a neoliberal ideology backed up by American exceptionalism, which apparently the UK is a signatory, as it were, and it's messianic, and that's what makes it so dangerous. It's so, because other empires. I mean, look at the Imperial Chinese Empire. They basically had very little interest in exporting their way of life. Okay, no, they would go for resources, they'd go for slaves, all of this type of thing. But they were concerned with their status quo as they understood it. Now, the U.S. has no business being in most parts of the world, okay, at all. And this may surprise or maybe anger some people, but in most of the world, democracy is a procedure. It's not a civic religion. And this is what we get with this democracy summit and all that. It's not about democracy. It's a cudgel, okay? And it's really hypocritical, okay? And so through the course of history, empires don't act that way, okay? Now, like some elements of European colonization, yes, the drive to spread Catholicism, yes, that was a messianic element to it, but it wasn't exclusively that, okay? And so the American policymakers are willfully ignorant of history. The best thing the US could do is to start investing in its own country and its own people and be competitive in a super competitive world. It still can happen, but that window is closing very, very quickly. And then when the window is closed, then they're even more reactionary and even more violent, okay?
No, that's right. I mean, the white man's burden, I mean, you could at least believe for a while. There was a kind of a brief moment in the 19th century, and this was most advanced thinkers in the 19th century believed that Europe and the West was a higher form of civilization, and that it had not just the right, but the duty to impose this civilization on others. This was Karl Marx believed the same thing. I mean, that was Marx's view that, basically, hey, we've got this advanced industrialized society. I mean, we obviously need to export it to the rest of the world, but there's also, the advancements in politics, political freedom, and so on. Even at the time, it was already certain women's movement, that somehow there should be greater equality between men and women. So, hey, we've got all these great ideas, and the rest of the world is really backward. And I think that was the consensus view. I mean, all the great thinkers, Kant, Hegel, all thought that, hey, we understand human freedom and the rest of the world doesn't. And that's a big advanced idea that we need to export others. The problem with when they try to do that today is that no one's buying it. That historic moment whatever else we can say about it, that's gone. It's gone. You can't try to revive, mid 19th century Europe and start still believing all these ideas. We are more advanced than everyone else.
It was a few years ago, many years ago on Crosstalk, and it's actually during the George W. Bush was still president, and he had this vision for Africa and everything. So I had these African. All three were from Africa. And there was a woman from Kenya, and she said, the West really has to have an attitude change and perception change. We don't want your help. We want investment. Okay, we don't stop helping us. We don't need your help. We can take care of ourselves. What we need is investment so we can become an export-driven economy. She even said, like Germany. We want to be like Germany, not because they're Germans or Christians or atheists, but because they export. Okay, they make money. And she said. She told me, Kenyans are very well educated. I mean, the thing is, she was at great pains. You just have all of these images and visions of us that just aren't real anymore.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think that's what, in the end, what the West really had. I mean, they had that industrial revolution, and they had the economic power that came from that industrial revolution. And the rest of the world was in awe of that. I mean, the fact that they were able to conquer India and China and all these were ancient civilizations. They were just swept aside with ease by a handful of Europeans because, hey, they had some more sophisticated weaponry. They had the economic power that enabled them to sweep them aside.
And when you think of Stalin's 5-year plans, what was the referent? The UK, we'll produce more iron ore than the UK. We'll have more coal than the UK, little UK. Okay, George is absolutely right here. The referent, it was so very powerful, even for communist Soviet Russia.
Right. No, that was exactly right. That was it. That was the heart of the Industrial Revolution. And so we have a super chat from Detroit Rock City. Detroit, nice to see you again. The Russian invasion isn't imminent after all. It doesn't look it's imminent. I mean, I think October was, when the first we're hearing about this, and so I think
it's November, yeah,
October, November, and so it's kind of been ongoing. And now I think most people are thinking that these Olympic Games are ongoing, so that's probably not going to happen then. But in terms of whether some provocative incident could happen, I mean, that's not impossible. So, and then we have a good friend Spectre in the air. Thank you very much for another very generous super chat. It says, the US main problem is its elites. Very weak and intellectually inbred, managed decline is self-imposed. China has outplayed the US in every way. Well, definitely, the Chinese have certainly played their hand very, very shrewdly. There they were in the 1970s, this very backward country. When Nixon went there, and they had all that rubbish, that cultural, still in the midst of the Cultural Revolution, and Nixon had to endure some awful kind of Chinese theater, revolutionary theater, absolute claptrap. You can imagine sort of Nixon, why am I watching this rubbish? So that was China then. And for all those years, 80s and 90s, and Brzezinski and others, oh, great, China's a great ally, our ally against the Soviet Union. We've got China in the bag. And then, you remember when Biden said, oh, Chinese are going to eat our lunch. That'll be the day.
Oh, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And now, lo and behold, the Chinese, and you have to give it to people like Trump, who were warning about China, a long time ago. Say, hey,
China in the 80s.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So, despite what a lot of nonsense. Well, yeah, now you've got yourself into a problem compounded by this stupid anti-Russian policy. I mean, anybody, and this is again, Buchanan said this, it doesn't make any sense to antagonize Russia. Russia should be our ally, and that Buchanan said this, back in the 90s. Russia should be our ally. Why are we pushing Russia into China's arms?
And the architect of containment during the Cold War, George F. Kennan,
Right.
at a very august age in the 1990s, he must have been ancient, George. But
He was about I think he was about 101 when he died, so 101. Yeah.
He said NATO expansion would be a fatal error. Okay, he was the architect of containment. Yeah. It worked. Okay. Yeah. And so you have people like Pat Buchanan, God bless his soul, he's still with us, and George F. Kennan. Listen to people like that. Yeah,
that's right. So we got another super chat from Fred Smith. Thank you so much, Fred. And then, hey man, got another super chat. Thank you so much. Hey man, UK is the Don Jr. of the alliance. So I'm assuming Don Jr. is like Donald Trump Jr. I mean, unless I'm missing something, and maybe is there a pop cultural reference like Don Jr.?
I think that's the right Don Jr. There's only one.
Because I thought maybe like the Teflon Don. You remember John Gotti, like the John Gotti, and I guess maybe his son, John Gotti's son. I mean, they all ended up in prison, but maybe John Gotti's son was Don Jr. But I'm assuming, UK is the sort of the Don Jr. of the alliance, yapping away. And Don Jr. does yap away. He goes on Hannity. I don't know if he goes on any other shows, but he has a kind of aggressive manner. The sort of yapping. And his wife, I don't know. Actually, is she his wife now? The woman. I think they're married now. And I forgot her name now. I mean, she used to be a mainstay in Fox News. And you remember?
The brunette. The
brunette. Yeah, that's right. Can you remember her name?
I never could pronounce her last name. Okay, we all know.
Guilfoyle, Kimberly Guilfoyle. That's it. Kim Guilfoyle. Yeah. Guilfoyle. Yes, exactly. Actually, when you said you can't pronounce the name, and suddenly it came to me. Yeah, Guilfoyle. Yeah. But yeah, she's another one who's sort of yelling very loudly. Remember, she was speaking at the 2020 convention, and for some reason, somebody told her that you don't want to just speak; you need to yell. So she was just yelling. Everything she was just saying normally, everything was just at this raised volume.
And all the Trump women are running. They all gave. They were like announcing their presidential ambitions. Did you notice that?
Yes, I did.
I was kind of astounded by that. Okay,
right.
Trump women, they want to take the mantle. Okay, so
well, that's right, because I think that. To be honest, they don't really want to do the serious work of running the company. I mean, it's a big deal, and you have to, run that big company, Trump. I think that's left to the two boys, Don and Eric. So it's much better. Yeah, you run for president. That's a lot of fun. You raise money, make speeches, and then you just get elected. So.
Well, and they all just want to do the Kamala Harris gig. Okay?
Yeah.
No work, just the alteration. People just worship you. I mean, it's one of the most pathetic political careers we've ever witnessed. I mean, and you get to see it in real time every single day. This is just a catastrophe. This is a dumpster fire.
Right. Do you take seriously this? Which Laura Ingraham was talking about, the Michelle Obama. I mean, I don't take any of that seriously. I was kind of surprised that she actually even talked about that as if this was a real thing. I mean, just
no. I mean that's just the clickbait. That's just clickbait.
I think so. I think so too. I mean, again, that's a lot of work. Being running for president. I mean, it's like it sounds like a cool thing to do, but. I am sure that her lifestyle is extremely comfortable. She just, living in the lap of luxury, taking trips here and there, stay in this house, stay in that house. Why would you want to do any work? I mean, it's.
Well, what Laura was highlighting is just that the Democratic bench is just so narrow. It's just empty. Okay, because you know what, everybody, they're all exactly the same. Yeah. See, this is and this is what their ideology demands. And it ends up creating just pure mediocrity because one might be Asian, one might be Black, one might be gay. It doesn't matter. They're all the same people, okay? They hide behind, they do this false diversity nonsense, okay? It's not, George and I are old enough to know none of the external things matter. All that matters is what's in between your ears, okay?
Yep.
And what they do is they say, that doesn't count. It's how someone looks or their orientation.
Yep.
That is a recipe for utter failure, because what it does is it creates pure mediocrity.
Yeah, no, I think it's exactly right. It's exactly the most striking thing is precisely just how identical they all are. I mean, what's the difference between Buttigieg and Beto O'Rourke? And what's the difference with, them and Elizabeth Warren? Or, I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, she came on and she had something distinct to say. I mean, she was different from the others. That guy,
what happened to her?
Yeah, exactly what happened. And the guy, the Asian guy whose name always escapes. Yang, exactly, Yang, Andrew Yang. Again, he seemed to be different. He had some different ideas, so but again, if you don't follow, the party orthodoxy, then you just simply get, overwhelmed. And that's why, there really isn't. I mean, if you say, okay, well, let's get rid of, if somebody's thinking, okay, let's push aside Biden. There's no way we can run with Biden in 2024. And then Harris is going to lose. She'll lose against anyone. Whoever the Republican. Yeah, that's right. She will lose. So let's replace them with someone else. And then you say, okay, well, whom do we replace her? Well, then we have to go back into the past. Well, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry. I mean, you just keep having to go back, a generation.
It's a dilemma that they created for themselves. Okay?
That's right. So we got another super chat from Ryan McDonald. Thank you so much, Ryan. Nice to see you again. And says Michelle Malkin was banned by Airbnb for her interview with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. because of, quote, pandemic misinformation, unquote. Is RFK Jr. America first? That would be something like, that would be funny. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Embracing Trump's America first message. I doubt whether Robert Kennedy Jr. Will go that far, but I think he would probably have to say that all of his friends, all of the people who were once aligned with him, they've all gone. The only people now who are promoting him are people like Steve Bannon.
See, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's a very good prototype of what's happened. And it's kind of, I can say this has kind of happened to me, to be honest with you, is that, I didn't leave the left. The left left me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's what's happened. Oh, one of the, I was going to save it for tomorrow, but we'll have fun with it tomorrow anyway. I'm sure you came across the fact that more and more Democrats are watching Fox. They're leaving CNN and MSNBC. They've come out with some polls on this. Is that more and more registered Democrats, or more registered Democrats are watching Fox News than they are MSNBC and CNN combined.
Right. It is that's very funny.
It's the same case. It's not, they're not leaving the left. The left left them.
Right. But I think it really is quite stunning. I mean, this is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I mean, his father was an icon, a liberal icon for decades. I mean, that
it
the
will
name,
be forever.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the name Robert F. Kennedy. I mean, it's just, it sent tingles down liberals' spines. And then, this book of his, which is a bestseller, it became a bestseller in spite of the mainstream media. The New York Times has not reviewed the book. What happens is, the New York Times, it just ignores you. If it doesn't like a book, it just ignores you. You don't get reviewed. New York Review of Books, it doesn't review you. So you just don't exist. But there are now other channels whereby you become known. And so the reason he now this #1 bestseller is he goes on talk radio. I think he did Joe Rogan. I think he did Rogan. I know he's been on Bannon several times. So you can actually bypass mainstream media in the way that you couldn't. But it also means that he's kind of lost all his illustrious, well-to-do friends on the Upper East Side of Manhattan.
It kind of looks like that happened to Alan Dershowitz too.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. But Dershowitz, he subscribes to many other liberal nostrums. I mean, for instance, on vaccination, he seems he's a strong adherent of vaccination. But his thing of Trump, I think that he just blew it there. That once he started defending Trump.
Yeah, but that's how these things work. I mean, obviously, George and I know Alan Dershowitz is a courtroom defense attorney, and he's well known for many cases.
Right.
And then he's also known for his support of Israel. And so it becomes very complicated because, when he goes on, I mean, it was when I think that they said that Prince Andrew could be deposed, okay? And then it was the BBC called up Alan Dershowitz about
Yes,
Jeffrey Epstein. That's kind of an awkward situation to be.
Oh yeah, that very, very, very often. Hey, have you heard of a conflict of interest? I mean, so, yes. But now, I mean, Dershowitz, I think only Fox News has him on. I mean, at least in terms of mainstream television. I mean, again, he goes on all sorts of things on the internet. But that's. That's where I go. So anyway, we have another super chat from good friend Spectre in the Air. Thank you so much, Spectre. And it says, totally agree. First black female for Supreme Court, yet Biden attacked Clarence Thomas during his hearings. And it says, good chat, guys. Have a good week. Thank you so much, Spectre. Thank you. Same to you. And thank you for your generosity as always. I mean, it's Biden has some very bizarre kind of ideas. I mean, he's so absolutely crude in his, quota mongering. It's, there's a sophisticated way in which you can be for quotas and affirmative action. The way the Supreme Court, like in
they did the preferences over quotas.
And then you say, well, we're not going to have quotas, but on the other hand, we'll go out of our way to make sure that minorities are represented. So that way you don't actually say, but no, he said, no, we just have quotas. I mean, basically, I'm just going to hire a black woman and I'm not going to look at anyone else. That's the kind of crudity that the Supreme Court is uncomfortable, has always said, we're not comfortable with that. You have to dress it up, in a more appealing way, even
particularly for their institution, George.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. It's their institution. So
there was a case. What is it? I don't know that the senator. I think the senator from Nevada had a stroke, and so he's on.
Oh is it Nevada or is it? Yeah, I thought it's something like maybe Oklahoma or.
Okay, I'm not sure the
state.
I
know, or New Mexico, maybe New Mexico.
Maybe New Mexico, and then he's out of the right. He won't be able to cast a vote. So I mean, margin gets thinner and thinner.
It does get, but that some of those Republicans, rhinos are going to go. Susan Collins will go over. Romney will go over. The woman in Alaska, I always forget her name.
Murkowski.
Something like that. It's that I don't think that isn't it.
Polish name.
Murkowski. Is it Murkowski?
Murkowski. There you go.
Murkowski. Yeah. She may go over. So they may be able to get a few.
I think as things stand now, no problem. I mean, it'll be about everything else except for that, unfortunately. Okay.
Right.
But I think the nominee will probably basically cruise through. Okay. By pure numbers. I'm not saying there won't be a lot of controversy before and a lot of ink spilled over it, but I think it's a done deal. It's just a done deal.
I think so too, and particularly Republicans don't want to get into the business of being opposed to a black woman. They don't want to. They just don't. The visuals, optics of of being hostile with a black woman is just something that then they're not comfortable with. So so
I agree. I
yeah.
agree.
So I think it might be a very calm, soothing hearing. I mean, majority of the Republicans probably will vote against her, but they're not going to challenge her very harshly. I mean, they're just
but that's just the that's what is it? It's I kept using it last week. Was it soft?
the soft tyranny of low expectations.
Yeah, thank you, George. Low expectations. It's getting late for me. I think we have to wrap this up because I have to get ready for work tomorrow.
Yes, that's right. So is there any more? I think we've done. I mean, I think we had another super chat from Fred Smith. So thank you so much, Fred. I mean, you've been very, very kind today. All right, Peter. I think we'll give it a wrap. Well, it's a wrap, as they say.
We'll tear a page from the Bible. We're going to put a lid on it. Okay.
We'll put a lid on it. So thank you very much, everybody who joined us and
done.
Exactly. So thank you for all your comments and the conversation and discussions. Thank you above all to those who paid for the super chats. That's very, very generous of you. We really appreciate it. And of course, please join us next week. We'll be here every Saturday, as long as Peter says, as long as YouTube will have us. So far.
And look forward. And tomorrow, of course, we have thumbs up and thumbs down, so don't miss it.
Thumbs up and thumbs down. Exactly. That's always a lot of fun. So thank you all. Thank you, Peter. And remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.